And, Donald Trump yesterday, I was so jealous. He did this thing where he finally released the fake news awards, and I was lobbying to be the host. I wanted to be the host of the fake news. I was willing to buy a tuxedo from Knowles to do this show. I just thought, like, we should really do it. We'll have the, in memoriam of Keith Olbermann, things like this, just all the fake news. But the funny thing about the fake news is that he put them up on the RNC website, I guess, and it crashed. And so CBS reported they published fake news and then the site stops working, which was fake news because it crashed because so many people rushed on to see it. But what really got me about the fake news awards, and this is important as part of what I'm saying, is that they were actually very substantial. I mean, there were a few of them that were a little bit, what would you call it, trivial, but a lot of them were really substantial. So here, I'll just read them off. Number one, the New York Times, Paul Krugman claimed on the day of President Trump's historic landslide victory that the economy would never recover. He did say that. Now, I don't think Krugman should get a lot for that because that's kind of a typecast for him. He does that all the time. Every prediction he's ever made about the economy has turned out to be wrong. Number two, ABC News' Brian Ross sends markets into a downward spiral when he reported that candidate Trump ordered Michael Flynn to meet with the Russians when in fact, so here, we have a little bit of video of the correction, I think. Let's play that.
ABC's lead investigative reporter Brian Ross appeared to be the one with the scoop.
He is prepared to testify that President Trump, as a candidate, Donald Trump, directed him to make contact with the Russians.
That would directly tie the president to the Russia scandal.
Now, that report caused the Dow Jones to take a nosedive, dropping 350 points at one point.
Except Ross misquoted his source, and it took ABC News hours to correct the mistake.
In fact, it was President-elect Trump who asked him to contact the Russians, which, of course, is a pretty much standard operating procedure. But again, this is Brian Ross being Brian Ross. Gawker once called him America's wrongest reporter. He's the guy who said that after the shooting in the Aurora, Colorado movie theater, that the shooter may have had Tea Party ties because he found another guy with the same name, James Holmes, who belonged to the Tea Party. So, I mean, he's really bad about stuff like this. Number three, CNN falsely reported that candidate Donald Trump and his son Donald J. Trump Jr. had access to hacked documents from WikiLeaks. Do we have this? I think we have a clip of this.
Now, we've been reporting that this email came on September 4th. That was before some of these documents were publicly available, but we have just obtained a copy of this email. And instead, we now learned that this email was on September 14th. So that is 10 days later than what we originally reported earlier today. And this appears to change the understanding of this story.
Yeah, change the understanding because the WikiLeaks had already been published. So somebody was sending him a letter and said, have you seen this on WikiLeaks? But that one, it's just a one, CNN. Don't feel too bad about it. Let's see, what else we got? Oh, Time falsely reported that President Trump removed a bust of Martin Luther King Jr. from the Oval Office. That was particularly vicious. And I love the fact, well, it's just a mistake. Just a mistake. I mean, that was a vicious mistake. That's basically the press reporting from its own imagination. This is Brian Ross reporting from my imagination. The Washington Post, number five, falsely reported the president massive sold-out rally in Pensacola, Florida was empty. They showed pictures of the empty arena hours before the crowd started pouring in. These are a little trivial. CNN falsely edited a video to make it appear President Trump defiantly overfed fish during a visit with a Japanese prime minister. And, you say they're trivial, but the point of this is that they're never in favor of Trump. They never make a trivial mistake in favor of Donald Trump. And that's the point. So that's how you know they're targeting Donald Trump. CNN falsely reported about Anthony Scaramucci's meeting with a Russian, but retracted it due to a significant breakdown. Oh, this is where they they suspended three CNN journalists because they said they hadn't followed their usual fact-checking procedure. So I think they should deserve a special award for playing the role of a network that actually checks its facts. That would be a real big change for CNN. Newsweek falsely reported that Polish First Lady would not shake President Trump's hand. That was false. CNN falsely reported that former FBI Director James Comey would dispute President Trump's claim that he was told he is not under investigation. That was a big, ugly, stupid mistake. The New York Times falsely claimed on the front page the Trump administration had hidden a climate report, taken it off their page. And last but not least is the Russia collusion, because now, I mean, it really does seem now, and look, we don't have this solidly, but it seems extremely possible that this entire Russian collusion story is Democrat Oppo research used by the FBI to cover up the fact that President Obama had corrupted the top levels of the Justice Department. Not the rank and file. Most FBI agents are doing their job catching bad guys. It's these guys who got political in the Obama administration, the Chicago-style Obama administration. And this whole Russian collusion thing may be a cover-up for that. We don't have that solidly, but it's very, very plausible that it's like that. And that the only reason that Trump hasn't blown the whole thing open by releasing the FISA request is they probably have some information in there that would reflect negatively on him too, as well. So he's holding it up. But that is a very, very plausible version, and they're just not reporting it. Only Fox News is reporting that aspect of the story. So here's the other thing. Part of this is while the media spent 90% of the time focused on negative coverage or fake news, the president has been doing things that they're not reporting so much. And this is still part of the president's release. The economy has created nearly 2 million jobs and gained over $8 trillion in wealth since the president's inauguration. African Americans and Hispanics are enjoying the lowest unemployment rate in recorded history. The president signed historic tax cuts and relief for hardworking Americans. President Trump's plan to cut regulations has exceeded 2 out of every 1 in mandate, issuing 22 deregulatory actions for every 1 new regulatory action. That, to me, is one of the biggest stories of the Trump administration. The president has unleashed an American energy boom. That is true. ISIS is in retreat, having been crushed in Iraq and Syria. And you will remember that Obama said ISIS is a generational threat, meaning there's nothing we can do. There's nothing we can do. Trump, bang, they're gone. I mean, come on. It's a big, big deal, virtually uncovered. President Trump followed through on his promise to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of the state of Israel, something every president has said they would do. Trump did it. With President Trump's encouragement, more member nations are paying their fair share at NATO. He signed, this is a big one too, he signed the Veterans Accountability and Whistleblower Protection Act to allow senior officials in the VA to fire failing employees and establishes safeguards to protect whistleblowers. President Trump kept his promise and appointed Associate Justice Neil Gorsuch to the U.S. Supreme Court. And that's just the headline, because there have been like 60 great judges appointed. All this stuff, the point of all this stuff is to create this atmosphere of Trump scandal, Trump outrage, Trump terror. And who does it affect? Well, here we go. Dan Henninger at the Wall Street Journal wrote a really good column today called The Trump Paradox. And the Trump paradox is that Donald Trump may be the most disliked president in the post-war era, even as he presides over one of the most solid first-year policy performances of that era, most notably a strengthening economy. For most of the first year, Henninger says, the Trump paradox didn't matter much beyond the altered psychological state of his audience. Reacting to Trump became like uncontrollable weather, a daily routine. But in year 2, the storyline is about to change. Why? Everything in 2018 will be identified in terms of its effect on the November midterm elections. And that is why Dick Durbin is going around telling people what Trump said in the meeting when he made that remark about hellholes. Now I have a new thing under my desk where I can press and silence myself, mute myself. So from now I can say, it's like I press whole countries, you know. It worked. Did it work? I hope so. Otherwise, we're off the air. But that is why Dick Durbin did this. Henninger says Dick Durbin poisoned the well of the immigration negotiations because he recognized he's a political animal, and he recognized that Democrats would gain more politically from public exposure of Mr. Trump's private words than they would from any DACA deal. So basically, Durbin and the Democrats are throwing the DACA people under the bus in order to make people hate Trump. Right? The Democrat resistance, this is Henninger again, the Democratic resistance, which looked pathetic and irresponsible in year 1, suddenly makes sense in year 2. The generic ballot numbers, which show the public preferring a Democratic Congress by an astounding 11-point average, are suddenly relevant. Suddenly it matters that Mr. Trump's approval in Georgia, which he carried in 2016 with 51%, is now 38%. And here's the thing. All right, here's the kicker. This one-man meltdown is occurring almost entirely among women, driven by a relentlessly smirking, I could care less demeanor. The beer and shot base loves it. Women, they just don't like it. Women came out of the woodwork to vote against Trump in the Virginia gubernatorial election that Ed Gillespie lost. And the fact is, as we talked about yesterday, Trump has appointed really powerful women to very powerful posts. Nikki Haley, Kirsten Nielsen at Homeland Security. Sarah Sanders is doing a great job. He was talking about that. He gave a speech, and he actually was mentioning, as he does when he gives himself praise, his accomplishments in this regard.
Making incredible progress. The women's unemployment rate hit the lowest level that it's been in 17 years. Well, that's something. And women in the workforce reached a record high. More women in the workforce today than ever before. That's really terrific. And especially since it's on my watch, I feel very proud of that.
Okay, so the difference between the facts and an atmosphere, an emotional atmosphere of smirkiness, scandal, but part of which Trump is responsible for, part of which Trump does. He's a rude guy. He's a belligerent guy. He says what he thinks, and he has this bullying attitude that it goes up women's back. I can see it. It's hard. You cannot sit and explain to your wife that her life is better because she's sitting there saying, but he does this and he looks like this and he says this. That it's really tough to do.